anything else that might interest people?
Yeah, cool. Um, I kind of have two day jobs. I'm founder and co-CEO of Flock Consulting, so data and analytics company based in Dunedin, but we've got team across the country and service clients across the world, really.
Hmm.
And then founder and CEO of Reportable, which is a platform as a service, software as a service. Again, another data and analytics, but software as a service, data analytics, providing reporting solutions in two spaces actually. One's in the allied health space, and the other one is in professional sports. So rugby, and now we're sort of looking at NRL and cricket, among other things. So
Yeah.
I do my best to stay busy and out of trouble running those two things.
It doesn't sound like it'll be too much trouble staying busy with all that going on, mate. Look, I also know you are interested and have been a member of the Institute of Directors, and certainly you and I crossed paths when I was at my last employ. With you're doing an internship on board, so you're still doing some of
Mm.
that stuff. And what's that shape up for you like?
Yeah, so I've been a member of the Institute of Directors for about almost 6 years now. Um, I chartered member, so I've gone down the pathway of doing the test and doing the chartered membership in the week of company directors course. I spent 18 months on the board, as you mentioned, of Aurora Energy here in Dunedin, and then spent 3 years on the committee of the Otago Southland branch of the Institute of Directors. I've done some other roles. I was president of a local ice skating club, and some
Yeah,
other roles. At the moment, I've taken a step back from the governance space. So I've just finished with the Otago Southland branch, mainly to focus on the businesses
yeah,
and really just focus all my energy there. But definitely, I think the doing the time with Institute of Directors and spending time on Aurora, there's a huge amount of that the skill base from that comes into running a business and making sure that it's being governed well, even if we haven't sort of got a formal governance board or anything like that. There's definitely the thinking around the running a business and running a team. Those skills are important.
yeah, yeah. I imagine so. There's a bit of crossover, definitely. They're very, they are different kind of lenses for looking at leadership too. So, how about you share a little bit about your journey into leadership? You and I've known each other for 6, 7 years now, and always came recommended as a good bugger, which I reckon is number one for leadership. But in terms of those different lenses within the business, on the business, and then governing the business, I think there's probably a bit you can chew on there and share with us.
Yeah, it was interesting because when we talked about doing this and we sort of talked about the idea around leadership, I sort of sat back and had a thought about actually what did my journey really look like from a leadership perspective, and how did I get to the leadership style, I guess, that I take on now. Actually, I went all the way back to when I was at high school, and I was playing basketball, and I was given the captaincy of the Otago basketball team. It was like the under 14 team or something like that.
Yeah,
And like when you're 14 or 13 and you take on a leadership role like a captain of the basketball team, you don't really know what's going on and what to do. And so in some ways I took on the persona of what I saw on TV, or what I thought was the right way to lead a team. And you know, going into a tournament, we went to a South Island tournament or something like that, and I led in a particular way. And I always felt it was always funny because when I reflected afterwards, I always felt inauthentic. I felt like I
hmm,
was doing this leadership style, even as a 13-year-old. That wasn't me. Um, and then it was interesting. So sort of then the next major milestone for me was in the early 20s, early 2000s, when I moved to Sydney, and I didn't really have any job, and I ended up getting this role as a trainee branch manager. So ANZ at the time, early 2000s, had this program where they took people from outside of banking for 6 months. They trained them up, and then they put them in as branch managers.
mm,
Um, so I got this role. I don't know how, but I got this role, and I ended up getting a branch right in the CBD of Sydney. And I'd basically had 4.5 months worth of experience going around different branches,
Yeah.
and learning like to be a teller and to be a personal banker and all this sort of stuff. And so it was really interesting because I got thrust into this role, and I actually really didn't know what I was doing. And so what I found was I decided, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to lean on everyone that are already in the branch. So tellers and personal bankers and other people within the branch that had been there a while, and I just sort of opened myself to being, asking them for help and asking them what they thought and all those sorts of things. And what I found was, because I was willing to listen to them, because I was willing to take their ideas, because I was willing to let them sort of, lead their roles, and me just do the leadership bits that the branch required. I sort of found this leadership, which was not leadership at all. It was being part of a team, and
Yeah.
I had this role to be the branch manager, but I wasn't there to lead as such, and that in itself became leadership. And it was quite an interesting process, because what I learnt in that was, actually, I didn't need to really sort of manage these people. I just needed to manage the branch and help them become the best of themselves. And
Yeah.
then of course that just bred, loyalty, and I started to sort of pick this up, that actually we did really, really well when they felt empowered to do the things they knew how to do. And so that was my first sort of l- I guess my first sort of opportunity to see what, empowering other people was all about. And then I guess my next one was just prior to starting Flock. So I started Flock in October 2018. Prior to that, I was working for two consulting practices, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland. And in
Yeah.
both cases, what I saw was not that. It was the old overbearing managerial style. It was not trusting, not empowering, all those sorts of things. And I've said this sort of story to a lot of people. And when I started Flock, it was basically, I was complaining, constantly to my wife about how bad leadership was, and how it was creating a toxic environment, and how all this and this sort of stuff. And then in the end, it was, I got to stop complaining about it and do something about it,
Hmm.
which is where Flock came from in the early days. And it was truly to create somewhere where people love to come to work. And so, that's my journey. And then it's never stopped. Like, I was always a technician. I was always a person doing the work. And
Yeah.
so I've had to learn heaps in the last 5.5, 6 years, to transition out of doing the work to to being the leader. But at the same time, I've had to figure out what that means and what that looks like,
Yeah.
and who I am in that process, because I've had to stop doing the work on the tools. And even now, with me with Spencer taking on a bigger role in Flock, I'm even more distant from the business. And so it changes all the time. And I think, if you're not changing as a leader, I think if you're not growing and moving with the times, then you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah, so that's really insightful, John, that challenge, moving from the technical aspect of a role that you get drawn to as someone that's young and oops, I'm bumping my mic, and enthusiastic about a technology or the shiny stuff, that gets you out of bed in the morning, and you build an identity around that, and you become good, you become known for those things. And leadership's almost the polar opposite, right? And in the context of, it's not about those things. And I even have a little intellectual wrestle with myself. Well, I'm still doing work. It's just not that work, and I get home at the end of the day, I'm saying, Leslie, I didn't do any work today, and she just looks at me and says, "Oh, you dumbass. Your work's just different these days, right?" And so, how do you deal with that? And how have you dealt with that?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting, because when you're a doer and you're a technician, like you were saying, like, it's so easy to quantify the work that you've done.
Hmm.
It's so easy to say, I built a report, or I, built a SQL table, or I created a document. And it's so easy to sort of quantify that and feel successful when you've completed a project. But
Mm.
leadership's never complete, right? Like, actually, you never
Yeah.
finish. It's just constant. It's ongoing, and so I think that's something that I've been really challenged with. Not challenged with actually doing it, but challenged with the concept of allowing yourself um, the ability to be comfortable with not actually having done something
Yeah.
during the day or done something that's quantifiable. And there's other things like small gains. In leadership, I think it's lots and lots and lots of small gains,
Yeah.
because whether it's with your team or whether it's, well, it is with your team, right? And it's watching them grow. And I think that's now where I get the most, um, I guess, feedback to myself. So we have a remote team. We'll probably get talking about remote work, but we've got a fully pretty remote team. We got together in Auckland a couple of months ago, and of course everyone came in and everyone was in the same room. And it was at that moment where I was kind of like, whoa, like all these people are the team, like this is our team, this is my team. And it's sort of those little moments where you kind of go, yeah, this is success, right? This is success, that we've got this tight team and they're all friends and they're all together now. And it's quite a cool moment when that happens.
Yeah, and like that kind of leads me to think that the role of the leader has changed, particularly in this digital age, as it takes. I was about to say it takes off. I've been doing this 30 years. It's a slow takeoff. But in terms of that traditional, that could have been quite a confronting situation where you are remote and you come in, you're not used to working together in a physical sense. Was it different? And being remote, is it different?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I've actually been a remote employee for the last 15 years.
Mm,
So before I started Flock, I was a remote employee for sort of 8 9 years, and so for me it's not that different.
yeah.
Um, so I was working. So from 2011, I was working remotely for a Christchurch company, and then after that, remotely for an Auckland company, and then started Flock, and we were basically remote from day one. Um, so so I think in some ways that's what's helped Flock, and our team, because um, we were native.
Mm,
We were native right from the start, and so my leadership style hasn't changed, because mostly in the modern world for me, it's been in a remote environment. That's all I've
yeah.
had.
So you've lived it, you've breathed it, and that's the. I
Yep.
guess we're seeing this. I mean, there's the media and all the analyst firms. They come up with these, 2 or 3 word, one line kind of descriptions of quiet quitting and all these kind of things that are going on as a result of COVID. But that probably didn't matter to you so much
Nah,
because you haven't needed
a-
to worry about it so much.
and I don't think quiet quitting or anything like that is actually a digital phenomenon, because I worked in a large pharmaceutical company when I lived in Sydney, and guarantee you there was 10% of those people were coming and sitting at their desk and doing bugger all work. So
Yeah,
you, you,
quiet
you
working.
quiet working, like they were just sitting there, and as long as they were sitting at their desk, everyone thought they were working. But the reality is a lot of them wouldn't have been doing much work. Well, there would have been people there that weren't doing much work. So, is it the individual, or is it the circumstances? And I'm really careful about who I hire, but at the same time, if a business has got a good culture and they look after their staff and they give people challenges and they give them interesting work and they do all the things that they should be doing, whether they're remote or not, I don't see why that should be any different because of the technology.
Yeah, then that's it ultimately, right? My philosophy in this space is, if you go back to you kind of talking about that traditional managerial type role, and or another word, micromanager. What are you doing? And you're handing out the tasks like a little slip as someone comes in the door in the morning. I'd leave if that was expected of me as a leader, just plain and simple. And I think there's a natural feedback mechanism for those that aren't doing what you expect of them or what they've agreed to do because they signed an employment agreement, right? And I often joked over Aurora, I could walk around the office waving paper in my hand and look all flustered, and then do a survey and say who's the busiest, most output person, and I'd win just simply because visible and paper, but actually done nothing for a week. Don't let anyone know that. I should have won,
It's too
but
late for that.
too
But
late
yeah.
for that,
Yeah, but it is interesting because I don't think I mean I like going to the office. We have an office in Dunedin, and we're about 7 or 8 of us there in the office, and then the rest of the team are all over the country.
yeah,
I like going to the office because I think personally I've become a little bit old, and I quite like going in and separating work from home. I like the focus that it gives me, and I like being with close to the team. Not
yeah,
because I want to watch what they're doing or know what they're doing, just because when we get the opportunity to talk, we get the opportunity to joke and talk about the rugby or the weekend or whatever. And it's a little bit difficult to do that with people that are online.
yeah,
I mean, we still do it, we still try, um, and but I've got people on the team that they just absolutely love it. They just thrive on it. Working from home,
hmm,
it is their dream place. Um, and and I wouldn't expect any of my team at all to be one of those quiet quitters, because we've built an environment where people want to be doing the work that they're doing because that's what they're passionate about.
Well, that's right. You said it earlier. Kind of. I think you used the word careful about who you bring on, right? And that's an important thing. You evaluate and you make calls based on fit, because technical skills you can teach as
Yep.
well. So you've got to be looking for those individuals that are adaptable. They have some accountability. Not and everyone is not 100% on their game. I think that's the other thing. There's ups and downs, right? And as a leader, you've got to appreciate and acknowledge that, and learn how to navigate it with your teams as well, um, and be respectful of them as people, as much as anything. It's not just an individual agreement that's been signed. Well, this will, um, in terms of a question related to your field and data, because
Mm.
data is everything, right? But how do you approach decision making in a world, particularly where data is so abundant, and the tech landscape's constantly shifting, right? It's
Yeah.
you've heard of AI, right? I should.
Yeah. AI, or yeah, that
What's
thing.
that?
Um, it's it's not a fad, but it is. Look, I think decision making is an interesting one, because it's entirely what we do as a business is help people make decisions, or help businesses make decisions, and
Yeah.
and data is what they use to do that. And I think I've had to learn. Like I've made some bad decisions in some of the products and some of the things that I've put out, and had to learn the hard way around actually what do people need to make to have good quality data and good quality information to help make decisions. And it's so fundamental now that from a data perspective and a report perspective, to make decisions you need something that's a lever. So I talk about levers a lot, right?
Mm,
um, and a lot of people are still, or a lot of businesses are still reporting on outcomes, and outcomes are a useless piece of information because you can't do anything about it, right? So you have to understand the levers,
mm,
and to understand the levers, you have to understand the fundamentals of your business. And to make good decisions, is you have to know what fundamentally your business is doing,
yeah.
and what it can do in the environment. And so for me, levers, if it's something, if that number, that date, you're using data to give you information on a lever to pull, then it's the right piece of data, because you can go away and you can action it, right? It's that whole concept of actionable insight.
Yeah.
I've got this analogy that I've used a lot, and it's the idea about baking a cake. So if you relate a business to baking a cake, the widget or the output or the sales at the end of the day is the cake, right?
Yeah.
And so when you go into the kitchen, you don't just go into the kitchen and go, right, what is this? I'm going to bake a cake. Cake. Yep, okay. No, what we do is we need to step back and we go, right, well, what's a recipe? What sort of cake are we going to make? What's the recipe for that cake? Fundamentally, what are the cores of that cake? It's flour, it's cocoa, it's sugar, it's butter, it's milk, it's, whatever. And then you've got your ingredients, and then you've got your methods, right? So you've got your ingredients, you've got your methods. You measure the flour, you measure everything you get all those measures right, put them all in together at the right time, at the right speed, and what have you, and then you put it in the oven for the right amount of time. The cake just happens.
Yeah,
That's the output. But all those levers before, you put in too much flour, not enough flour, too much butter, not enough sugar, whatever, the outcome's not going to be great. So the same thing for me is the decision making that you make in a business is understanding what are the core ingredients, what are the core methods, and
yeah.
what are the right values for them. As you
It,
get that right, then the outcomes will happen.
yeah, and I like that as an architect because it's kind of the description of all those things. There's a phrase that in my discipline operating model and understanding the fundamentals of it, call it the freaking recipe for organizational success. This is how you make your chocolate cake with ganache or whatever. Becomes important, right? And data doesn't just happen either, right? It's a part of that. It's a part of that recipe, and it's informing those levers or those different steps as you go through as well. Um, uh, yeah,
Yeah, the interesting part about that, and the interesting part about data is that to make good decisions, you have to have the right data. And it and
yep,
it and it's interesting. Often we're working with clients, and I'm working with clients in the reportable space. And actually, I did this today, and we're talking to a client about the data. He wants these reports, and then we went through this process, and all of a sudden he realized he wasn't capturing half of the data. So he can't create the report on something he doesn't have.
yeah. And
So
to
he's
get
gonna
those things, you need someone to do something.
exactly right. But
Yeah,
that's kind of cool because, and this is it's interesting process because a lot of organizations, and hopefully I'm not putting shade on you, but a lot of organizations will go, hey, we've got these source systems, let's create a data warehouse, or let's get all our data together and let's clean it up and let's do all that sort of stuff, and then they try and make reports. And
yeah,
it's actually like, no, you define your report first, and then define what the data needs to be, and then find out if you've got it.
yeah,
Because none of that stuff can, quite often we see the source data comes out, data warehouse gets built, and then the reporting goes, oh, we don't have everything we need, or it's in the wrong format. And so it's really good to start at that outside bit and go, what decisions do we want to make, what do we need to make those decisions, and then work your way back.
yeah. And like there's some age old stuff that you kind of know if you've got if you've got a finance system and you've got all that stuff, right? That's not a
Yeah,
competitive advantage, and you just got to know, well, how much purchase order outstanding, rah rah rah. And the assumptions can be made, but more importantly, if you're looking for data and your way of operating to be a competitive advantage, you're bang on, right? And call it a report or call it what you want to put into the market, right? What's your customer buying, and even in those terms as well, and you can work back from that, right? We're exploring that notion at the moment to build a competitive advantage off the back of the great country that New Zealand is in a global sense, right? But it's going to take time and energy then to piece that all together, right? Because we will have gaps as we've looked from. I'm being a little bit kind of just steering wishy-washy around because I don't want to give away secrets. But in
mm,
terms of that process and until you fill those gaps, you're not going to have that full picture. You can't monetize it or you can't express some value with it either, right? Whether you want to monetize it or not, it's not the point. But
yeah. Well, it's interesting because we've built this software as a service reporting solution. So it's prepackaged reporting,
mm,
and it was interesting because I've come from large enterprise, central government, um, you know, big corporate, building operational reporting, and I've been doing that for 18 years.
mm,
And then I built this software for small business, and I basically built this operational report. And it's like, hey, look, there's so much information here. You've got all this information about this, and this, and it was like, and we just weren't getting cut through because people at that level, it's just like, yeah, there's lots of data, but what do I do? What do I do with
yeah,
it? And then I rebuilt the dashboard that basically has 4 KPIs on it that all lead them to something that is something they can specifically action. And boom, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Because of 4 numbers. That's all it took. Actually,
y-
those 4 numbers is all they really care about. The rest is there,
Yeah.
it's great, but most of the time they're just using those things, the outcomes of those 4 numbers to make actions, and it's making the world of difference to their business. So it's like sometimes you just have to step back and go, what is actually the number that's going to make difference?
Yeah, I think it's been able to boil it right down, and the things that I think you said before is you can action against as well. If it's information that's helpful but noisy, it's probably less helpful. And if you can't do anything with it, then you've got to question why you're even collecting, and or you might still need the process to be doing something, but you don't necessarily care about the aspects of it showing up in data.
Mm.
But I think that in the context of the age we're in too, leadership is it's important, but B, in the age of social media and constant connectivity, how do you manage your public persona? I had someone that chose not to come on here, not because they didn't like me. Well, that's what my view. But they had a strategy in their own career where coming on and being in the public was not the right thing for them to do at the moment. So that's cool. I accept that. But how do you look at it?
Look, I think the thing I learned when I was 13 years old was about being authentic.
I
And I know it's probably an overused term, being authentic, but I think if you actually fundamentally go to, I'm being authentic, I'm not making up what my authentic is, that it actually doesn't worry me what my, I mean, I'm careful about what I say.
Yeah.
I will say that, but anything I do say is what I believe, and I'm authentic in that sense. So I wouldn't say I've curated a public persona, or in any way thought about how people are going to perceive me. In some ways, as I get older, I I I give less about what people think of me,
Yeah.
and I'm more willing to have an opinion, and be clear on what my opinion is. Um, but I think at the same time, it's like my public persona is who I am as a person, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it easy, and it means, sometimes I've got to be careful about what I say, and that, but I certainly don't say anything I don't believe in.
Yeah, well, just being careful is just part of life, right? Like
Yeah.
these, uh, I'm pretty honest, but sometimes honesty isn't the best thing either, right? You can be nice and give honest feedback, but you can still do it nicely. You don't have to be real, the blunt honest, if you like. And leadership is, in my view, is knowing when to say things as well, as much as saying something, right? It's being able to dial that in and dial it back as necessary.
Yeah, and I think that actually is a big part of leadership that you need to learn, because early days for me, having a team that I was responsible for, and reliant on, because in the early days of the business, it's like you feel really, um, not needy, but you kind of like, I don't want to lose a staff member because they're so important to me, and they are all important.
Mm,
Um, but then you take that too far, where it's like, oh, I don't want to bring that up, or I don't want to talk to them about that because I'm worried that they're going to be unhappy or something like that. But actually, really good leadership is being able to speak to them in a way that's respectful,
mm,
because it's not good for anyone if you're holding something in, or there's a problem that you need to deal with. So something I've learned a lot is actually being able to communicate something that's annoyed me, or made me unhappy, or I'm not happy about, but to do it in a professional and respectful way.
yeah. That's a skill. I was still learning. Yeah, I think. Wow, if anyone said they were doing it perfectly, they're bullshitting you, right? But
Yeah.
there is, because there's different personalities too, and the best teams aren't all just sort of facsimiles of you, the leader, getting diversity of thought and skills and all those things coming into the mix is really important, and then that doesn't always help your interactions, even as a leader. I've found this, so you've got to work out different ways for different people, and being able to communicate in different styles, and even different mediums, right? How do you find that?
Look, I've had some moments where I've had to have. So I'm lucky because my wife works with me, and my business partner. We're all quite different personalities, and it's really good because we're all complementary in a way. And so there's definitely been times where I've just had to say, "Oh, I can't do this conversation," because I get pretty. With some of them were. I can probably talk about that now. Some of them in particular were to do with clients. Like we had some clients that were really against our values and culture, and
Mm,
really causing trouble with our staff. And in some ways, one of our clients, a person within a client, was bullying one of our staff members, and I
yeah,
was pretty wild. I was ready just to go in there and just tell them that they're out. And luckily, I was able to bounce things off, you know, other people to calm me down, but they'd
yeah,
still obviously give the message. But having people to talk to, having other people to bounce ideas off, and sort of calm down, and then come together with a better plan.
yeah. Yeah, I like some. That's really important. They'll chat GPT or Claude will do that for you these days, right? I've had some pretty interesting conversations with the AI. Like a learning for me even wasn't in the corporate world, but in the gyms. I had a couple of CrossFit gyms down here for a while, and um, one of the parents' kids was behaving in an unacceptable way, and it was a really tough conversation. I'm not having your kid here doing that. Sort it out, and becomes a part of that value construct, and authentic, and standing behind and up to what you believe in. Right, it's really important. I think those things are key, and having values that align with where and who you work with. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Values and culture, and the cool thing about values and culture. So a lot of uh, we've we put values and culture in. So most of the core team that were around when we first put values and culture aren't sort of in the business anymore, but apart from me and maybe one other. Um, when we put values and culture in, it was real.
Mm,
It was genuine from the again, authentic. Again, it was based on who we were as people and what we really wanted to see. It wasn't just like, let's do values and culture because that's what you should do. Those values and culture still live today, um, and the team own them.
yeah.
The team, that's how they make decisions. That's how we all make decisions, how we treat each other. And that's how a lot of our clients buy into us because of it. And so, we don't, it's been a long time since we've had any sort of conversation, or need to have any sort of conversation. It'll be over a year, simply because that's the foundation of everything. And that's the second slide on our presentation, is that's our values and culture to a client. It's like,
Yeah.
that's what you're here for.
Yeah, those are important, right? But even more important is seeing it and being it,
Yep.
right? We used to have this. There was a funny line back at Geni in the day, and I will relay the story to you another time that won't go on here. But it was be, do, have. So it was a really catchy way of, if you want to have these things, you got to do these by being this. And it kind of resonated with me. I've never used it officially anywhere else, but it's the kind of thing that sits in the back of my mind. Behavior, the being, is an expression of value, or values, at least in that context, or the culture. Right? It's all about. It's not the brand. It's not it's not reportable in a font with a color scheme. It's where they see you show up, and the conversations, how you treat and engage with people. Right? That's your brand, and it's very difficult to
Mm.
express that. And
Yep.
look, I think that's a salient point, just in terms of doing these kind of things, right? This becomes an expression of your brand in a way. What do you think in that context? How you build out
Oh,
and outwardly express?
definitely. The two. The first two values we have are flock together and give a flock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, first one is flock together. We are a team.
Yeah.
That is the fundamental core of who we are as we work as a team. And underneath that, it's basically there's no heroes. You look after your team. And then the second one, give a flock, is you care, right? And
Yeah.
you care about your employee, your colleagues, care about the client, and you care about your community. So it's not just about us as a business; it's broader than that, right? Because I think every business has a responsibility within a community as well. But um, and it's interesting. Every month we do what's called a Kotahitanga Award, which is an award that gets given out based on values and culture.
Yeah.
And the person who gets the award one month then picks the person who gets it the next month, and so it's the
Yeah.
team living their values, and they own the values. And it's always the other ones are excited by change and pixel perfect.
Yeah.
You know, so we're always changing and we're always trying to deliver our best. But they're always giving out the award based on give a flock or flock together.
Yeah.
It's always giving out the award based on someone who's helped someone, being helpful, showing that they care, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, look, that's the essence of it, right? Those other things will happen as a result. Being pixel perfect, the team will come together, they'll deliver a 24/17 win because they came together in the last 20 minutes when they needed to, right? It's really important.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate the English couldn't do it again this morning, or this happened to them double whammy.
Oh yeah, the soccer.
Yeah,
Just got pipped at the end, eh?
yeah, unfortunate. Look, in terms of this, I mean, you and I are, we like some shiny stuff, magpies at the end of the day. In terms of the rapid acceleration, the fast-paced stuff that's going on, how do you and your team keep up to the scrub on the tools, and that AI is going to take all their jobs, isn't it?
I so we've got a senior solutions architect in the team, and he's kind of the one that he's kind of the gatekeeping of all our technology that we implement.
Hmm.
Um, and him and I have known each other for a very long time, and I sort of phrase um, what we are as conservative innovators. You know,
Hmm.
we're always looking for the best solution possible to do our job. So we're always looking for the best solution, but we're not going to jump on a solution that isn't proven.
Yeah.
So we haven't implemented anything to do with ChatGPT or AI really into any of our client or our business environments. However, I use ChatGPT all the time for you know for for messaging and for all sorts of different things. But we haven't implemented it as a tool set within our client environments.
Yeah.
Two reasons: like we still think there's still enough issues from my perspective that we can't jump into it,
Yeah.
and from a risk perspective, that's not worth it. Um, but also, I think AI, like there's definitely use cases out there, but there's not as many as what people think.
No, no. Well, the thing I joke about though, John, is it's like it's not AI. What everyone's getting all excited about is just a large language. It's a big
Yeah,
dictionary that can string words together, right?
yeah,
That might be underplaying it somewhat, but let's be real. AI is not new. AI has been around since the 50s, and actually even you go back before that. So this technology has been coming a long time. The overnight success of ChatGPT
yeah.
bullshit, right?
Oh, there's
It's
there's. I remember doing it. I was working in ClickView
yeah.
15, 16 years ago, and there was a tool that we could add into that could do. It was basically an LLM.
Mm.
Um, so it's nothing new. The thing for me, and it's interesting because this is where I have an opinion that I'll that I'll loosely hold.
Strongly held.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The problem we have with a lot of the AI innovation, particularly in our space and around our ecosystem, is that it's a thing that everyone's like, we've got to be doing AI, and then companies will come out, and we see it in our space at BI or data analytics all the time. Technology will come out, companies will come out and go, oh, we're going to implement that, we're going to roll this out, we're going to do it for you, we're going to charge you shitload of money to do it, and then we're going to give you nothing at the end of it because actually it's not worth
Yeah.
doing. I've seen it over and over and over again, and I just refuse to be that company. And we're starting to do it. We're just starting now to work with some partners that are better than us at data science and machine learning, and at the LLM space as well from a co-pilot perspective. We're not doing it. We're partnering with people that are specialists at it.
Yeah.
So I think, from our perspective, we'll innovate to the extremities of what we believe is right, and then if there's anything outside of that, we'll partner and bring other people in. I'm always learning and staying abreast of everything I possibly can from a high level. And then I've got someone like Glenn who gets into the weeds and figures it out technically.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Then you can't be all things to everyone. And I think the biggest challenge I've had in my career, 30 years ago, it was much easier. You could pick a couple of things and get really good at it. There's just so much of it now. The breadth and the depth of expertise required. And if you think that you know all of one thing these days, you're kidding yourself, let alone all of all things, right? I know that's not a new kind of paradigm or anything, but you've really got to test yourself. It's one of the things in the role I have, because it's quite broad just by nature of it, what it is. It's actually the difficulty in leadership is looking to where you should lean in as well, and not. I can get distracted quite easily because shiny stuff, but
Yeah, and I think too in the technology space, you get a lot of fanboys, who
hmm
think the one tool is like the only tool that can do this thing. It's the best in the world, and it's like, so and so is like, oh, why would you use anything else? It's like, there's actually probably three or four things that could achieve the same outcome, but
mm.
unless you've got the outcome defined and the way to get there, it doesn't matter what tool you've got, you can still screw it up.
Oh yeah, everyone can write a check for a shiny thing,
Yep.
but I'm participating in a working group with Business South at the moment around AI and innovation for the Dunedin thing. There'll be a few of the other usual suspects you'd know from the Dunedin scene, but we were talking about just the stuff the other day, and being, you know, like you can't get romanced by it all. You've just got to be really clear and understand what problem you're leaning into. That's where I was going, and falling in love with the problem. The solutions will come because there's too many solutions to choose from. But I guess that leads into the next kind of thought process for me. What's your approach to managing that? The information overload, A1, we're consuming and producing, we're producing and consuming more information in a day, well, probably in an hour, than someone, 100 years ago would probably consuming their whole life. I don't know. That's not a real statistic. Don't hold me to it, but it makes a pretty valid point, I think. How do you get your
Oh,
team focused on what's truly important for the business? And
I think it comes back to what I said before about knowing the fundamental levers, right? And it's not necessarily the lever of the business, but it's uh, firstly, how do we stay focused? Is fundamentally we have specialists. You know,
hmm
I've there's at times where the guys are like, oh, I really want to try that, and I really want to try that, and it's like, yeah, but like you're never gonna deliver the best outcome because you're really awesome at this. So let's do really, really good at this. And there's going to be new technology, new things that come in on the edges, but ultimately the outcome is what we're trying to achieve. Um, we've got, from a technology perspective, we've got a pretty stable stack that we use.
yeah,
So most of the time we're pretty linear about what we're using from a technology perspective. So we don't have a lot of like shiny object looking, because the guys really love the technology that we've got.
yeah,
Um, but I think, personally, I think there's a huge amount of need for me to focus at times, because there's so much as a leader in a business, there's so much that you can focus on.
yeah,
There's so much that you could be out there looking at and figuring out and all that sort of stuff. And at times I've just got to go, this is what I'm focusing on for the next 2 weeks, or whatever, for the next period of time. And it's funny, like I will go through and delete podcasts and delete um, places that I'm following on LinkedIn so that I don't get that noise,
Yeah, yeah.
just so I can
I hear you.
focus. But it is quite interesting that I've downloaded books on my Kindle, for example, and downloaded them 12 months ago, and I'm going back to them now because it's actually now I'm in that time when I need to focus on that, and then that's
Yeah,
all I'll focus on. So it's just, I mean, there's just so much you could, and with social media, like, you could constantly consume information. So I think you just have to be disciplined about what is the important thing right now, and that's like anything, right? What's the lever right now? And we've been through that in a business sense, where kind of over the last maybe, I don't know how long, 3 months, we brought on a new person for as a project manager, and so our focus is cycling through the business to improve our project management, and that's our focus at the moment, is improving those
yeah,
processes. And 12 months ago it was something completely different.
yeah.
And so you kind of just have to go, right, this is our focus for this period of time so that we can get to the next level, and then we're going to have a different focus.
Yeah, that's important, and leadership is about that. I think I've said it before. The greatest challenge as a leader is the reduction of ambiguity and providing people focus. Is also from a personal point of view, that's really really difficult because I do like to explore and get intellectual about things, and so that can get you lost. One of the
Mm.
things that I've started doing, it's nice to hear you're deleting stuff and putting to stuff that's just not serving you anymore. I'd always given my wife Leslie beans about keeping lists and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I remember this shit. I got a memory like an elephant, and then I didn't. I never did. It was just a story I told myself, and then I could always make up. I could wing it when someone caught me not remembering something because I'm, pretty confident speaker. Oh shit, I'm letting out my secrets now. But I've started writing stuff down and learning a way to do that that's effective for me. I've tried a shitload of productivity tools, and digital ones suck. So the one that worked for me was writing things down,
Yep.
and it's not so much about checking them off; it's about getting it out.
Mm. Yep.
Do you do stuff like that in your thought process, or
I bought a Kindle Scribe, so it's my Kindle, so I can read my books on it. But it's also
yeah,
like it's a digital note taker, so I
yeah,
can scribble on the books that I'm reading, but I can also go into a notepad and I can write all my notes. So
sweet,
everywhere all my notes now just go into that, because my problem is I used to write on bits of paper,
yeah,
and I'd have
yes,
all sorts of bits of paper all over the place. So now
a
I've got
hundred
everything in
lists,
there, and I can file them and folder them and all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
And that was massive for me. Like, that was a big transition. I
yeah,
want to loop back just 2 seconds because I think it's a really valid point. In that focus space, I think what's really important from a leadership perspective, when you're trying to focus a team and focus a business on doing things over a certain period of time, they have to know why.
mm-hmm,
The why is probably the most important thing, is that to get that buy-in and to get to people to understand why you're going through, why you're changing things, why you're doing something, why you're focusing on a specific thing. They have to understand why, and they have
yeah,
to understand, like, what's the vision and what are you trying to achieve by doing that. I think that's more important than anything else, is like making sure that everyone is on board and on the bus for the journey of that process change, or whatever the change might be.
yeah. Shit, and that's one of the hardest things to do, right? I often think I'm like a 53-year-old 2-year-old because I'm kind of always asking why. And just why am I coming to this meeting? What am I doing? What am I doing in here? There's no agenda in this decline. So you just got to get brutal in understanding why. That's probably not the right. Yeah, no, that is. You got to get brutal about it because there's so much that you can do and get yourself distracted by. So yeah, I think that
Mm.
is really valid in terms of keeping people moving. Oh, cybersecurity awareness. Yeah, is that a problem for you at the moment
Oh,
with the team and other stuff going on?
so we've put technology in place on all of our laptops. So all of our laptops have technology on them from that perspective. But
Yeah,
I always talk about the newspaper incident, right? It's like this mythical newspaper incident. And if we end up in the newspaper because of a cyber breach, we're gone.
Hmm.
So that's the way we treat our business. Is if anything goes wrong, we're done. We're all out of a
Yeah.
job because we're a data business,
Yep.
and we can't afford to get it wrong, because that's it, game over. So we take it really, really seriously. And like I was saying, with our solution architect, it's like everything from a security perspective is number one for
Yeah.
what we're doing. So really careful from that perspective. For all our clients, for all our stuff as well. You just can't take it for granted. I mean, you hear about it all the time, right? Even massive businesses like Telstra got done, and is it
Yep.
Telstra in Australia got smashed. Snowflake, not that it was their fault, but there was, the issues around Snowflake and the clients that got hacked. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, take it really seriously. Um, do everything we possibly can so that we don't have to hopefully be on the front of the newspaper for the wrong reason.
Yeah, and look, it's important. I think it's an onus on individuals too to tool up and be aware of these things, because still, even with the greatest technology tools, the weakest, the underbelly is the soft pudgy stuff that comes in the front door after they've swiped the physical card to get in, right? And
Yep.
people need to be aware of things. I've been doing this a long time, and you can get complacent too, right? So it's just staying on your game, and you know, um, from a question like that to emotional intelligence and the tech industry's challenge with it, should I say?
Oh,
um,
oh.
Without wanting to give too much away, I mean, shit, we're full of IQ.
Well, yeah, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? Like the old IT geek. It still lives so much, and
Yeah,
it's an interesting one because, and hopefully not hurting anyone's feelings out there, but a lot of particularly males in IT have this godlike belief in themselves, and just
mhm.
think that, well, there's a couple of things, right? From a personality perspective, they think that they know everything, and they think everyone should know what they know.
Oh yeah, the worst combination.
And it's like you have these conversations where it's like they do something crazy talented on the computer, and it's like, hey, that's really good. It's like, and they look at you like you should know what they were doing. It's like, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know, but you're really good at it. So how about you just keep doing
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Just keep tapping those keys.
So I think it's a big thing. Like, from a leadership perspective, emotional intelligence is fundamental. It doesn't matter whether you're in tech or not, but there's definitely a challenge in tech, because people get promoted because they're the last one left, or
Yeah,
they've been in the job for 10 years, so they end up as a manager, and they're still just IT geeks, and
yeah.
they're not managers, they're not leaders. And it fundamentally is a completely different role to lead a team, or lead people in any sort of sense.
Oh,
And
I agree with that. Like it's and often the worst thing you can do is promote the best expert, right? Because I've seen that happen. I've been in sales, and the best salesperson gets made the manager, and guess what? Sales stop coming in the door. I mean, you don't
yeah,
have to be a rocket scientist to work it out. The guy should still, or the girl should still be selling, not managing people. Did
yeah,
Sir Ted ever play for the All Blacks? No, but he's one of the best All Blacks coaches in history.
yeah, yeah, and much like in the coaches you see in the NBA, right?
Mm,
And I think it's a really important point, because in the concept of an individual contributor, you know, inside the business you have pathways, right? And
yeah,
these pathways are so fixed, and it's like, well, the only route that I've got to earn money and go up the ladder is to become a manager. And it's like, well, that's ridiculous, because
yeah,
you're worth more to me delivering as an individual contributor than screwing up as a manager and becoming unhappy and disappointed in your job,
yeah,
and then ruining the world for everyone underneath you as well.
yeah,
So I think, and we've got a guy. I've got a guy on the team now, and he's a great guy, really good at what he does. He thought his pathway was this, and it's like, well, it's not your personality. It's not actually what you want. You want to earn that money. Well, we'll pay you the money, but let's go down a different route where you can be a technical specialist and really deliver from that perspective, but not have to go down somewhere you don't want to be.
Yeah, and I think like that is really valid. We had a similar notion at Microsoft, and individual contributor and manager. I mean, I never was aware of the pay bands, but I knew, as an individual contributor, you could be on the same level in terms of how you are measured and remunerated, which is really important, right? And I thrived in that environment for the time I was there. But you do need to recognise that you could have people in your team you're paying more than you, and shit, why do you care? Like, it doesn't matter. And you got to get over yourself. I think that's a really important thing.
Because I say this to the team, right? And you look at, if you look at sports, right? And soccer players or even rugby players will probably probably getting paid more than coaches. Um, but I say this to the team, and I say this to everyone when I'm hiring. So I have a 30-minute session whenever I'm hiring, and it's values and culture. And I say this to them when I'm hiring. We have a team of people. We have, I have my role. We have senior leaders that have roles. We have junior people that have roles. We all have a role within the team to do something and do our bit, but we're all a team
Yeah,
ultimately. And I think that's where some people get lost in thinking that, oh, I'm a leader, I'm a manager, so I'm better than these people or I'm above these people. Um, and it was like the lesson that I got when I worked at the bank. It's like I was the branch manager, but the reality was I had an administrative role. And yes, I managed the people, but really they managed themselves if I gave them the space to do it.
yeah,
And so that's kind of how we roll now too.
yeah. Yeah, I think for me that's crucial, and I've wrestled with it, but like I miss doing some of the on the tools stuff, and I know there's some at times my skill set is probably better suited to a particular project, and that's okay too, because if you make up a part of the team, you can contribute in that way, and the next time it's not your role and that group of people coming together to solve something. So
And sometimes it's good to know actually how to fix something,
yep,
especially in technology. Like if you've actually been there and done that and you know how to do it, that's quite handy. But then
yeah,
again, like anything in the data side in my data team, I kind of fundamentally know what I want as an output and what's going on, but I would not have any clue how to do what those guys do.
yeah. Yeah, and like it's the same for me. And some of my skills, they look similar to what the team's doing today, but it's a little bit dusty, sort of from 15 years ago. So you do have to be conscious of those things too. And well, back to the whole essence of this podcast, strong opinions loosely held, right? We as leaders, we grow, we get some experience, or for anyone, it doesn't really matter whether you're a leader. You get to that point where you've formed these opinions for whatever reason, but be open and understand that as more information gets presented, that you can change. It doesn't have to be a hard line, right? Hey, we're at just about on the hour, mate. Who would have thought? Coming on a podcast with Daz, we'll use the oxygen. Final question for you, mate. If there was one piece of advice that you would love to have heard, you were giving yourself when you're 25, sort of thinking or throwing into the leadership role in the bank, that you would love to go back in time and whisper in your ear now?
Um, it sort of goes back to what I said earlier, and that's be yourself and know yourself. I think the key thing, that I learned was, and I learned it more through seeing other people do it wrongly, is actually know what you're good at, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and fill the weaknesses with other people that are really good at what they do,
Yeah,
and be okay with it. Be okay with them knowing more than you and being really good at what they do, because you can leverage that as a leader. And the most um what am I trying to say, or the most I'm just trying to think of the word, I can't think of it. Anyway, the more pleased I get is when I see my team excelling and doing really, really well, because
yeah,
I used to say, I heard this saying once, a leader, a good leader surrounds themselves with people that are better than them.
Yeah.
Right. And I used to say, well, I must be a really good leader because I've got a whole team of people that are better than me.
Yeah, yeah. So and on that, getting feedback and understanding those things is really important too. Hey,
Yeah.
look, mate. Thanks for joining me on Stronger Opinions Loosely Held, and I think you're a great exemplar of that notion.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to catching up next time we're kind of standing outside bakery on Bob,
Sounds
and
good, mate. Thanks
but I
for having me.
appreciate your time. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was good.